Thank you, Rick, as well. So I want to ask everybody this morning just a simple question, which is, what are some of those questions that you ask when you first meet somebody? Like, where are you from?
How much money do you make?
How much money do you make? What else do we have? What do you do? I'm sorry, did you say something about whoop-de-doo? We're talking about at a church, not at a bar. That's a totally different thing. What are you doing later? Sylvia?
Are you available?
Are you available? Yes. For prayer after service. That's our...
What do you like to do?
What do you like to do? Yeah. I love all these questions, but I know when I meet someone and I'm asking them questions, what I really want to get down to is I want to know, what do you care about and what are you living for? What is the meaning that you're gathering from life, and what are you seeking to do with that? And I'll ask any old question to get there. What's your favorite kind of ice cream? If you were a crayon in a box of 64 crayons, what crayon would you be and why? It doesn't matter, but what I'm really listening for is to get past the surface stuff, to get to the heart of who someone is. And I'd like to say that I would have no problem just saying, hey, what do you care about and what are you living for? But I hold back from doing that, and the reason why isn't because I'm so afraid to ask that. It's that sad experience that some people don't know. Some people don't know what they care about, and they're not quite sure what they're living for. They've unfortunately got so caught up in the surface of things, in the status, in the materialism, in the I live here and do this and do that, that they've lost a sense of that soul of who they are and who they can be. Thus I think it's so important for so many of us that we require a new definition for living, a new definition of living that's not about the surface of things, not about showing off or just fulfilling who the eyes of the world say we should be, but that's about living from and for what we really care about in our lives. Now, the thing about having a new definition for living is that you should never, ever let anyone define life for you. You should always define it for yourself. You know why? Because life is hard to define. It can hold within it a lot of different definitions. I love what Douglas Adams said. He said that there is a theory of the universe that as soon as scientists discover the truth of what it really is, it immediately transforms into something even more bizarre and difficult to understand. There's another theory that says that this has already happened. I don't know about you, but that's how I feel about my life sometimes. Just when I've got it figured out, it turns all twisted and sideways and all over the place, saying, think again. Think again. That's kind of how life is, and so be open with your definitions. But what I want to share with you today is perhaps some things to consider including in a new definition of living for yourself. Because we may not be able to always understand what life is or have a choice about what it is, but we do have a choice about how we live it, about how we show up, about how we enter the everydayness of our lives. And the first thing I want to invite you to include, if you're building a new definition for living, is the idea of simplicity. Simplicity. Simplicity is essential to a new definition of living. And I brought a Zen poem I quite like to share with you today. It says, "There is really nothing you must be, and there is nothing you must do. There is really nothing you must have, and there is nothing you must become. However, it helps to understand that fire burns, and when it rains, the earth gets wet." I don't know about you, but I kind of take a breath of relief when I hear that. There's nothing I have to do. Can you say that with me? There's nothing I have to do. There is no one I have to be. There is nothing I must become. Now, can you really believe that? No, that makes sense. It's a lot better when you get to choose to do the things you do, and choose to become who you want to be, and choose to enter into your greater becoming. But there's something about toning it back and realizing that my responsibility to life is to live, and hopefully to live it fully. I know too many people that look at their lives and think it's about trying to make everything perfect. It's all about arranging things in such a way as it would not reflect that we have any sort of issues or confusion going on within us whatsoever. You know, we struggle to try to make things perfect, but we forget that perhaps things are just as they are because that's how it helps us to grow. That it's just the way that it needs to be for us to live in a simple and profound way. A couple years ago, I shared a story here about Karen Miller, who is a wise teacher, and she had bought a home for the particular reason that the backyard had a beautiful Japanese garden in it. But she was very unhappy with the ponds in it. It was all murky and filled with roots and all sorts of gook in there. And so she called in an expert in Japanese gardens and in ponds, and the person inspected everything and came back to her in awe. He said, "I've never seen a more naturally clearing system in all of my days. Everything was just perfect." It's kind of the idea that maybe your life may appear a mess, but perhaps it's just the way that it needs to be for your perfect growth, for your perfect clearing. Miller goes on to say that we settle in the sheep turds because that's where the fruit trees grow. And with a little work, the fruit tastes pretty damn good. Some people settle with a field or a flock, some with a stick or a shovel, and some on a bench, chair, or cushion. Once you learn to settle the mind, you can settle anywhere and begin to cultivate the scenery. Then you might realize that the ground of your mind is the very ground of this earth, where your feet find the path and the future appears in plain sight. It dawns like the faint glow of an early morning. Even before you open your eyes, you know it's the sun. When you're struggling, when you're confused, when it feels like there's too much going on, plant yourself in that simplicity. Remember these words from the holy film Monty Python and the Meaning of Life, where we go through the whole movie and finally get the end, and this is it, the meaning of life. Well, it's nothing very special. Try and be nice to people. Avoid eating fat. Read a good book every now and then. Get some walking in. And try to live together in peace and harmony with people of all creeds and nations. Can you do that? It's a great place to start. A second idea to include in a new definition of living for ourselves is the idea of embracing change. Embracing change. Any big fans of change here in this room? I'm hearing laughter, so I'm guessing not. And I'm going through a lot of changes right now. Our church is going through a lot of changes right now. And what I've learned is that change can be a very difficult thing. And yet we have a very important choice to make in relationship to it, to cling, to get terrified and scared, or to dance with it, to embrace it. And perhaps we can even make a little change ourselves. Too many people do I meet in my life who their life can be defined by the brief phrase, damage control. All life is about damage control, keeping everything the way it is as long as possible. The kids, are they okay? Stay the same. Am I okay? I got to stay young forever. Got to hold myself together. Got to hang in for that paycheck. Can't find a greater financial source anywhere else. Got to keep things going. Got to keep things the same. Got to keep in damage control. Damage control, damage control. And the question becomes, how's that working for you? Right? Because that's the thing with that change is we can't really stop it, nor do we really want to force it. The idea is are we willing to, if we can, dance with it and move with it and accept it, and perhaps no matter what is going on, still seek to live in joy in accordance with what it is that we care about and what it is that we're living for. It's graduation season, so it's that time of commencement speeches. How many graduations have you been through already here this year? Some coming up this week, perhaps? And I'm always keeping an eye out for the best commencement speeches, and there was one that was published this year that I think is my favorite, and it's from the film director John Waters. So if you haven't heard of him, probably a good thing, because you'd be amazed that I'm talking about him in church, but he made some really great movies in the 70s and 80s. Hairspray is probably his most famous one. But he gave a commencement speech at a design school, and he called the speech "Make Trouble." I like that, make trouble, because it's what I'm talking about right now of making change. Don't be afraid of change. Step into change and make it yourself. Help define it. And he talks to the kids there, and he says, today may be the end of your juvenile delinquency, but it should also be the first day of your new adult disobedience. It's a good message for us in a church where we're all made up of rebels and religious refugees, whereas as Emerson and as my good friend Barbara back there would define herself, a good nonconformist. And we want to take the best of that teenage rebellion, which says we see the world out there and it's not enough for us. We want to change it. And we want to take that in an adult way, which says we don't do that by just poo-pooing on all these ideas of society, but we get in it and we transform it. We make trouble. We make change. We stand in our truth and allow things to transform. And Waters shares a message. He turns to the parents and the kids and starts to talk to them both. And tell me if you can see the change in here. He says, parents, now it's time to talk to you. God, these kids can be brats, can't they? Do they think you're made of money? Can't they give you a second to adjust to such social changes as sexual reassignment surgery, horn implants, and the political rights of the adult baby community? And young adults, maybe today is the day you stop blaming your parents for every problem you've ever had. Whining is never appealing in a college graduate. Yes, it's a drag you were kept locked in a cardboard box under their bed and whipped daily with a car aerial, but time to move on. We've all been dealt a hand. Deal with it. And parents, vice versa. You don't get to order up your kids either. Maybe your daughter did tattoo her entire face. Well, work with what you got. Think positively. Maybe she'll open a fancy tattoo parlor in Paris. So make trouble, make change, and be willing to go with it the best that you can. It's not easy, but it's much easier to dance with it than to run from it. A third idea to include in a new definition for living is compassion. If you are wanting to redefine your life in some way, make sure that compassion is central to who you are and what you're seeking to do. There's another old Zen story. It's about a teacher who takes on students in his monastery, and there's a lot that are doing a great job, but there's this one, and he gets caught stealing from the monastery a couple weeks in, and all the students are outraged by this, and they let the teacher know, but he just kind of lets it go. And then a few weeks later, it happens again, and the teacher lets it go again. And the students are outraged. They get the teacher and everybody together, and they say, either this guy goes or we go. We can't have this happening here. And the master, he looks at the students and he says, truly, truly, you are wise students who know the difference between right and wrong, and this young man does not know the difference between right and wrong. So truly, you wise students can go and study with any teacher that you want, but I will stay with this young man who does not know what is right and what is wrong, even if he is my only student here. And at that time, the thief began to cry and made a commitment right there that he would never steal again. And it's a powerful story, and I'd like to think that the students cried as well and realized that righteousness isn't about seeing yourself better while you look down on others. That living a spiritual life isn't about getting rid of everyone in your life who's just living a more human or mundane existence. That standing in your truth isn't pushing everyone out who isn't in alignment with your evolution or knowledge. It's about being willing to be a presence to let them all in and to be there with them as well. talking about a new definition of living, I'd like to introduce a new definition of compassion. A new definition of compassion that isn't just about having empathy for others, forgiveness of others, and understanding of others even when they're in their flaws, but about having true love for ourselves in any moment we're in, where we're frustrated, where we're missing the mark, where we're not sure quite what to do. That's what compassion really is to me. It's not just my ability to love someone else in the moment, but to love myself in that moment as well, because it's what releases me to be at one with whoever it is that's bugging or suffering or going through whatever they may be going through. My definition of living is always changing as I am, and it's definitely in relationship with this idea that we teach here of remaining open at the top. But I would also say that something that's always in there for me is the idea that life is a sacrament. Life is not a test created by some God to judge my soul. Life is not just a school where I'm learning and graduating. It's not an accident that began when God said, oops. It's not all of these things. It's how I experience the sacred and the divine itself. And that, at some level, is what I'm always trying to do. How can I touch meaning in this situation? How can I see the sacred in this person's eyes? How can I listen, even in stillness, to the voice of the divine speak? Most of the time, this is a wonderfully fun experience to do, but sometimes it's really hard. You're probably like me. You look out there at the world and don't see God sometimes. You look out there in the world and you might even get angry at God sometimes. But that's where, to me, that true compassion comes in, even to forgive a divine presence for not showing up the way that it should. There's an old test that says in your morning, in your spiritual practice, say that prayer that blesses the majesty of God, the immense love of God, the wonder of the sacred. Then when you're done, pick up the newspaper or turn on the news. See the crimes that have taken place. See the illness that is going on in the world. And when you're done, see if you can do the same prayer again. That, to me, is what a new kind of compassion is. It's that ability not to try to put God somewhere where we don't see God, but to show up in a situation, to be present for the divine to reveal itself, to know that we can show up as an open space for divinity, to know that we can show up as open ears or an open wound or an open heart, to allow to express through us a deeper love and knowing that has never quite been expressed in that way before. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, says in his book, It's Up to You. He says, if a man knows that life never began and will never end, he will be immediately fortified and inspired to begin the work of bringing out perfection in his daily life. When a man understands that God is incarnated in him, that he is a new creation, an individual impartation of that which is divine, he feels a new birth. When he grasps the face of the divine thing in him, which longs to be, will always be, then will his intellect see it and his emotion respond to it, and life can no longer frighten him. So just taking a prayerful moment this morning, I invite you to join me if you so choose, as I ask myself, how can I better live a new definition of living? One where I seek not to define life, but through living fully and completely as who I am, I allow life to reveal and define who I am. How might I better embrace simplicity in my life, to accept myself as I am and begin to live more fully as just what that is? How might my life be different if I embrace change and moved with change instead of trying to fear or turn away from it? And how might my life be different if I more embrace compassion? Compassion for myself, compassion for the people around me, compassion for my world, even compassion for my God. What does it mean to truly step into this life and be not afraid of it, but to allow it to fully become that which I am, so I may express and bring forth that which it might, possibly, through each and every one of us, become what it can be. We let this prayer speak with gratitude and with contemplation as it embodies in the depths of our being and comes forth. And so it is. Amen. So thanks for your time, everybody. Thanks for being here this morning. Great to see you.